So, being the joyful Sunday that it is, we should take some time to understand what that means exactly. The joy of faith, so to speak. And I'm going to start with a pet peeve of mine. It bugs me whenever a non-believer says to a believer, "I hope your God makes you happy." That bugs me every time, because God does make me happy, but not in the way they mean. In my experience, when you hear something like that, "I hope your faith makes it easier for you to deal with the world." When you hear something like that, the spirituality of it all is being taken as a coping mechanism, an object. And in that line of thinking, then, faith makes us happy the way a cheeseburger makes us happy. Or the latest video game, or a cute baby kitten. And none of those things are bad, by the way, obviously. Playing a video game while eating a cheeseburger and cuddling with a baby cat, that's like the perfect Saturday afternoon. So I'm not condemning baby kittens, okay? It's not the point. The point is that faith is a little different. Faith is different. It's a different thing because it's about who we are inside. So it's a longer lasting happiness, that much is true, but it's not really about pleasure. Alright? Pleasure is what you get from cheeseburgers and roller coasters and pop music. I hope your faith makes you happy. If you can't compare that to food or fun, then what can you compare it to? Well, here are a few phrases that do at least a little better at mirroring faith. I hope watching your children grow up makes you happy. I hope your best friend of 20 years makes the world easier to deal with. I hope your life's work gives you meaning and purpose. You see how all of those things are still about happiness, but they're about so much more than pleasure. That is faith. That is what faith is like, assuming that there's hope and love somewhere in the mix. So on that note, I've got to share with you a few words about gaudium, or joy. Because joy is what we're really talking about. That's the best word for it, this long-lasting happiness. The best word we have in English for that is joy. And St. Thomas Aquinas speaks a great deal about the joy that springs from charity, or the joy that springs from love. Same thing for him. The joy that springs from love. And he says that there are two kinds of love: concupiscence and benevolence. So concupiscence, do you hear the word Cupid in there? Concupiscence is self-directed desire. All right, it's selfish desire, self-gratification, you might say. So eating whatever you feel like is concupiscence. Acts that we would describe as lust, as opposed to love, would be concupiscence because it's about self-gratification. We're talking about self-directed, short-term love. And we've all got that. To a greater or lesser degree, we've all got that kind of selfish love. The other kind of love is benevolence. That is love that is directed toward another. So that means that it's kind of a friendship. It is a kind of friendship. So that means you cannot show benevolence to a cheeseburger. That doesn't make any sense. But you do live out benevolent love when you put your spouse or your kids before yourself. Benevolent love is a boss who does everything he can for the sake of his employees. Or just, think about a teacher who goes out of their way and puts in the overtime, not for the money, but for the sake of their students. That is benevolence, and we all have that kind of love as well. Or at least we should. Because someone that doesn't have that doesn't have a scrap of benevolence, not even a little bit of friendship to anyone or anything, that is a miserable creature. All right? That is an unhappy, joyless individual, and no amount of cheeseburgers can change that, no matter how much bacon is on top. I'm sorry if I'm making you hungrier than usual. This is just the way that my thoughts came together. But if I bump into a lot of you at Dublin's after Mass, I'll understand. Anyway, so with all of that in mind, the joy of faith is nothing less than the joy of friendship with God. The joy of faith is the joy of friendship with God. And brothers and sisters, I will tell you right now, that is precisely the difference. That is exactly the difference between a healthy spirituality and an unhealthy spirituality. I don't care how organized your religion is. I do not care what your denomination is. That is key. A healthy spirituality sees God as a friend and as a father. There is benevolence. There is a two-way relationship. If someone has that in their heart, they're probably going to be okay. And by contrast, an unhealthy spirituality does not have that sense of friendship with God. No benevolence, no give or take. In that case, well, that just makes God an object. He is just this abstract coping mechanism in the sky. And for someone with that attitude, there is no meaningful difference between organized religion and organized sports. Joy is the byproduct of love. And the best, longest-lasting love is benevolence, a friendship, two-way love, not just taking but giving. The joy of faith is the joy of friendship with God. So with utmost sincerity, I hope your faith makes you happy in the way that your friends and your family make you happy. And I hope that your faith helps you understand that you are loved and special just the way you are.